Okay. I think we had started doing Plato and the influences on Plato. So okay, so I was talking about the various influences. Uh, I told you that the biggest influence upon him is his teacher Socrates. And then I told you that Parmenides uh, is also someone who basically uh, was pretty significant influence on Plato. Then there is Pythagoras and Plato's mathematical orientation plus his, what should I say, plus his uh, apart from his mathematical orientation, even his philosophical orientation regarding the soul comes from Pythagoras. And then I told you that there is this rather difficult to explain, uh, a bit difficult to explain phenomenon called Protagoras. I told you that Protagoras was somebody who was the Greek pronunciation is gnostic. The Roman pronunciation is gnostic, and the English pronunciation is gnostic. So if you take the English, let's stick with the English pronunciation of Gnostic, but it is Gnostic. So it is a bit of a difficulty because Protagoras and Socrates didn't see eye to eye. But despite that, there is the influence of Protagoras on Plato. So let's first start with Socrates and his influence on Plato. Uh, Socrates is what Bertrand Russell calls a gadfly. He calls him a gadfly because Socrates apparently talked a lot, but but that does not mean that he spoke nonsense. He questioned everything, and I told you that the methodology that he seems to have followed, uh, if you look at what Plato is saying, it looks like he followed this dialectical dialogue. A dialectical dialogue is very different from the dialectics of the modern period. I told you that. I told you that Hegelian dialectics operate at the level of the mind. The Marxian dialectics operate at the level of history, and sorry, uh, you have uh, the dialectic of, if you see the modern dialectic, you have the dialectical materialism of Engels. Please remember that dialectic materialism is not Marx. Marx talks about historical materialism, not dialectical materialism. So the usage of dialectic in Plato is very different from these dialectics. You'll see the difference between them when we go to the next semester. I told you, I gave you an example the other day. I'll quickly go through that so that uh, you remember uh, what it is that I was talking about the other day. I was trying to tell you that even in our everyday conversations, there is a certain kind of an expectation when a question is asked, an expectation of a response. Like, for instance, somebody asked me, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm fine." So if I ask somebody, "How are you?" then I expect them to say, "I'm fine." Or if you want to be American, you can say, "I'm good," as if the others are bad. And then you can also have a possibly different kind of an answer. You can anticipate this as well. You can say, "No, I'm not keeping well. I have some problems." Say somebody got COVID. So they'll say, "I have some problems with COVID. So I'm under isolation," or whatever. So you see, these things are uh, followed. Uh, I mean, the conventions of a conversation already have this whole thing about anticipation of responses to questions that are raised. So if I ask you, how are you? You will not say that there's a traffic jam in Secunderabad. I don't expect you to say that, right? So now, what Plato did, rather Socrates did, is that he pushed people into basically answering him in either the positive, where they agree with him, or they disagree with him with each question. And at the end of it, at the end of the whole thing, he demonstrated that the sophists, mainly the sophists and Protagoras, were wrong. That is what you will find in uh, Plato. That is what you will find in the dialogues. And I also told you that the Republic is written in the form of dialogues. Now, before I go to the next influence, uh, which happens to be Parmenides, uh, there is, let me give you a small bit of, what should I say? Let me give you a small bit of uh, information regarding Plato. Plato taught what he believed in. So when he uses certain words, those words don't have the same conventional meanings that we have in our commonsensical vocabulary of today. They have different meanings. And what happens with Plato is that when he wrote the Republic, he wrote it in this dialogue form. Now, has it occurred to any one of you as to how Plato could have written a book called Republic? Because ultimately, I told you Plato is one of the first documented philosophers who believed in a robust education system and a meritocracy. And he wanted his ideal polis to be ruled by a class of people that he called the philosopher kings. So this is Plato's idea. Now, how do you basically reconcile this with a republic? A republic is where people have a say in ruling. Okay, India is a democratic republic. If you go to ancient India, the Janapadas that existed there were primitive republics because they had a panchayat samiti consisting of 5 people who regulated society. So that is some kind of a republic. But Plato is not talking about any of these kind of things. So why would his book be called The Republic? This is the influence of the Latin translators of the Roman period. The Greek title of the Republic is actually the name given to his book by Plato himself, is Politeia, Politeia. It's pronounced Politeia, and this, when the Romans tried to translate into Latin, they faced a problem because Politeia has everything to do with the polis, Polis, which is the Greek organization of, call them whatever you want to call them. You should call them polis. The plural of polis is Poleis, but it's not police. It has to be pronounced police. You have to stretch police as opposed to police, which will be a singular. So there was no polis, so to speak, in the Roman period. If you look at the Roman period, it did start as a republic, a primitive republic, like the Janapadas in India, before Julius Caesar converted it into an empire. And since we are talking about Julius Caesar, please remember that Caesar was his name. Julius Caesar was his name. Now, the Roman emperors took on that particular title, starting with Augustus Caesar, to show that, because again, their problem was, what do we call this person who's an emperor? In English, we have emperor. In Latin, there wasn't at that time any equivalent of that. So they took on the title of Caesars, which later the Russians took on as Tsars, and the Germans as Kaisers. But we are deviating. Let's get back to Plato. Now, if you're looking at the Republic as such, what you find with the Republic is that Julius, sorry, I mean, uh, while translating into Latin, people didn't people didn't know how to translate the polis into Latin. So since they had a primitive republic, they translated that into res publica. Okay, it is written in Latin, it is res, res, and it's two words, not one word. Like the republic is one word, but in Latin, res publica is two words. So you have res and then public, uh, public, res public, publica, actually.
Ah,
So
class na pole vairo.
if it is res publica, in English it became republic. But in that particular book, there is no content or content, sorry, which will coincide with this whole thing of uh, a republic. Okay, because it is something that is set in the polis, and like I said, Plato is somebody who's talking about a meritocracy. If you recall briefly, I had told you that there are two philosophers who basically gave great uh, importance to education. The first of those is Plato, and the next is Rousseau in the modern period. Now, Plato was a teacher. Not only was he somebody who advocated the importance of education. He was also a teacher par excellence. And his approach to things, thanks to the influence of mathematicians, is mathematics. So that is the thing that you should remember about him, about Plato. Now, Aristotle also was a teacher, but Aristotle doesn't have in his any of his various writings, nowhere is there an emphasis on an education system. Nowhere. Didn't talk about an education system at all. Okay, in fact, to be very clear, you will see that Aristotle is somebody who didn't write a single book. He used to speak and he followed a peripatetic form of education, which is he used to walk around with his students, and his students made mental notes about what Aristotle said, and when they went back to their dwellings, they wrote down whatever Aristotle said. They wrote that down. Now, the significance of this is that one has to be careful with Aristotle because there might be interpolations of his students in his writings. There might be, there might not be. That one has to be careful about. But when it comes to uh, when it comes to Plato, we have no such problems because Plato authored his own books. Now, like I said, Plato was primarily a mathematician, and the philosophical system that he constructed is something that basically, uh, what should I say, used mathematics. When we talk about his theory of justice, this will become very clear. But before we go there, you have to understand what the pursuit of Plato was. What was it that Plato was pursuing? Okay, so if any of you remember your social studies, I don't know if Plato is now taught in social studies. He was taught when I was a student in school. Uh, Not in depth, of course. Now, Plato is somebody who believes in the ideal polis. I'll refer to it as polis. We have to refer to it as polis because it is not, like I told you the other day, city state is a very bad, uh, it is an extremely bad translation into English of the polis. I want to tell you something here. If you say city state, then immediately a certain set of meanings flash in your brain because you have a concept of a city. Okay. And what is the concept of a city? The concept of a city that you have is basically something like, say, Hyderabad. Hyderabad has now become a global city. In my time, we used to make a joke and we used to say, Hyderabad is the biggest village in the world. But Hyderabad has now become a proper global city. So when you talk about a city these days, what do we talk about? We talk about broad roads. Traffic jams are inevitable because when crores of people are living in a particular area, then automatically it means that there will be traffic snarls and traffic jams. So that also is a part of our understanding of a city. We think of roads, uh, asphalt roads. We also think of things like, uh, what should I say, the metro. We think of a suburban railway system. We think of a huge place, a place that occupies several thousand square kilometers. And we also believe, or we also think of life here being different from those which are called rural areas. That is our conception of the city. And when we talk about the state, we again have a conception of the state in our mind. The conception of the state that we have in our mind is that it is supposed to be an agency that administers efficiently and properly and causes, or rather gives, goods to the dwellers in a state. By state, I don't mean a state like Punjab or the state written with a capital S. Okay, so we think of welfare schemes. We think of the state bailing out people who are, who have been, for example, victims of floods, victims of famine. We expect the state to bail out all these people. We expect the state to maintain our cities, our villages, everything. We expect the state to take care of its citizens. And this state is a nation state. It is large, it is big, it is something that has a huge number of people. If it is a country like India, second most populous nation, we are on our way to becoming the most populous nation in the next 4 or 5 years. It's believed that we'll overtake China. Let's see if that'll happen. Uh, so please remember that every word has not one meaning, but a set of meanings. Okay. A word doesn't have just one meaning. It has a set of meanings. And every time we use that particular word, we are unknowingly mentally invoking the set of meanings that we find in these. So, for example, if you talk about a school, immediately you don't think a school is a place where education is imparted. You think that as well. I'm not saying you don't think that at all. But you don't stop there. You think in terms of school uniforms. And depending on the kind of school you're going to, you see teachers in a particular light. Some teachers are very bad. I, for example, have faced a few bad teachers. Bad, not in the sense of the subject. They were excellent teachers, but they didn't have humanity in them. I remember one teacher picking up a book in which I was writing. He picked it up and he threw it away. He threw it at the door of the class. So I had to go and pick it up. So you also think of the bigotry of teachers. And if you are from Chaitanya Narayana, when you think of the junior colleges, you think of nothing but mugging and mugging and mugging, the same thing from morning to night. So it's a set of meanings that are attached to every single word, a structure of meanings, a set of meanings and a structure of meanings. So when you talk about the Greek polis and call it a city state, then the basic problem is that you are misrepresenting it. You are misrepresenting the Greek polis by calling it the city state. A city state, for example, is a modern phenomenon, and the best example that I can think of a city state is Singapore. It's a proper city state. Now, if you look at the Greek polis wasn't like this at all. The Greek polis was very different. It wasn't a city as we know it. It wasn't a state as we know it. The Greek polis, the organization of it, physical organization, is that there would be a central part which was usually a mound or a hillock or a hill, and that would be called the Acropolis. Acropolis. The Acropolis is the center of the polis. And strewn across around this, uh, strewn around this Acropolis were various different villages. So there was no city there at all. And there was very little contact between these different villages. They were there, they were being administered by different kind of people If it was Macedonia, you had a king. If it was Athens, it was an aristocracy. If it was Sparta, I don't know what to call the Spartans. They had a very, very strict aristocracy, perhaps. So the city state doesn't apply to the polis. You have the Acropolis and you have several villages, unconnected, unconnected villages around it. Decision making, like I told you, was done either by the aristocracy, or if it was a monarchy, it was done by monarchs. So you should not translate the polis into city state. Now, coming back to Plato, coming back to the idea of the polis that you find in Plato, what exactly are we trying to say when we talk about Plato? When we talk about Plato, what we are trying to say is Plato is trying to create the ideal polis. The ideal polis is the best polis, not the best possible, the best. Plato is uncompromising, is absolutely uncompromising, and he essentially wanted the best polis to be created. I told you the Peloponnesian War and the defeat in that war and the oration of Pericles, who was the leader of the Athenians, who said that these Athenians had become lazy. They did not have the discipline of the Spartans. All these things made an impact on Plato. So when he talked of Politeia, he was trying to create the ideal republic. And for him, the ideal republic is the best, not republic, sorry, polis, the ideal polis. And for him, the ideal polis is the best polis. Now, Plato throws a googly here. Plato basically says that the ideal is the real, which is something very difficult to understand for us. It is something very difficult to understand for us because we basically see ideal as the opposite of the real. Okay. If you say somebody is an idealist in our commonsensical parlance, if you say somebody is an idealist, then it basically means he's some kind of a dreamer, somebody who is unrealistic in his approach to things. So the ideal becomes a realist, is the opposite of the idealist. And this particular perception was strengthened by realism in international relations by Hans Morgenthau after the Second World War. They believe that the realistic things are the opposite of the idealists. But in Plato, idealism and realism are absolutely concurrent. They are the same. So Plato will say the ideal is the real. I'll stop here today. On Monday, we'll pick up we'll basically pick up the ideal is the real in Plato. This is actually called Plato's epistemology. So we'll get into Plato's epistemology first. And after doing his epistemology, we'll go to his Politeia. So the other paper, please excuse me today. I'm not feeling too well. So the second paper will start from Monday onwards in the evening. Is that okay with you? Okay. Akshita says okay. Bhavani says okay. Kirtana says okay. All right. So we'll go back to the evening classes. We'll go back to those things. Sharni, Tejasvi also say okay. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you to understand. And so have a nice weekend. And see you on Monday morning and evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you from all of you. Thank you very much.